Welcome back to the Women's Heart Health Summit. This is your host, Dr. Mark Menolascino, Medical Director of the Meno Clinic, Center for Functional Medicine in beautiful Jackson Hole. This is your chance to hear from international experts on all of the topics you want to know about optimal women's health, preventative heart health, and how to be the best you can be. We are super fortunate today to be joined by Dr. Amy Shah, one of my colleagues and friends. Thank you so much for being with us today, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
So I'm going to tell our viewers a little bit about you. We've known each other for a while now, and you're one of the gurus in integrative medicine. You've worked hard to get to the spot you're at. You're so knowledgeable. But I think the way you interact with your patients and the way that they want to get better by doing a journey with you is something that I see you bringing to every visit that you have.
Thank you.
Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Amy. Amy Shah is a double board certified MD with a certification in internal medicine as well as allergy and immunology from Cornell, Columbia, and Harvard universities. She was named one of the Mind Body Green's top 100 women in wellness to watch in 2016 and has been a guest on many national and local media shows. She helps busy people transform their health by reducing inflammation and eating more plants. It's all about food as medicine. As an immunologist, she realizes the power of the microbiome to help digestion, helps women to achieve natural hormone balance, and to assess for food sensitivities to achieve optimal wellness. Again, thank you for being with us, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
This is quite a journey you've been on. You've really done your homework to get to this spot. What's been the hardest part of your journey for you to get all of this knowledge in one spot?
The hardest part of the journey really was the fact that it's so hard to integrate nutrition and wellness into Western medicine. And every step of the way, I was trying to figure out how to do that in the traditional sense. And it was always difficult because I was a nutrition major as an undergraduate. I went to medical school to teach people how to get healthier through food. And I was frustrated when I came out of internal medicine and I felt like I couldn't do that. So then I specialized in immunology, and in America, allergy and immunology are combined. And thinking that I could incorporate more diet and wellness that way. And it was really frustrating to see that not only do we talk very little about nutrition in the Western medical sense, but we're not rewarded or given the time to really talk about wellness, nutrition, anti-inflammatory eating, all the things that we need to be doing every day to prevent, hospitalizations, to prevent heart attacks, to prevent diabetes, to prevent cancer. We're neglecting all of that.
So when women come to see you and other clients, where's the starting point of the journey? Is it listening to their story? Is it the testing that you do? Where do you find the most information for you?
For sure, it's their symptoms and the story that they tell. As you know, medical testing is not great. A lot of it is not validated, especially in the realm of inflammation, gut health, hormone health. There's a lot that we are still working on in terms of getting the testing right, but we are very good at knowing kind of the symptom, the list of symptoms. I can tell people when they have a gut problem, when they have an inflammation problem, when they have a problem that can really be helped with nutrition. I can pretty much tell from their story.
So there's a relationship of inflammation, the hormones, the heart, the brain. Does one have more control of the other? Are they all working together?
So inflammation is kind of a hard thing to define, right? Inflammation is basically like a fire that's burning. It can be a good thing in an acute setting. So you get a knee injury and there's acute inflammation. What we're talking about that's bad is the chronic low-level inflammation, and that can originate often from the gut. It can originate so from the foods that you eat, but it can also originate from the lifestyle that you lead, the thoughts that you have. So it can come from many different places, but a lot of it stems from the gut, which is the biggest needle mover, I think, in inflammation, is changing your diet through the gut.
You know, I've listened to several of your lectures and talks, and you really have so much kind of real world advice to give. You take difficult concepts and make them easy for people to implement. Are there some kind of go-to pearls that you have when you see your clients that you find really help them a lot, or some pearls you could share with our viewers?
Yes. One of the biggest things I think I try to teach women and people that I work with is that there's a big mind-body connection. It's something that we don't talk a lot about in Western medicine, that mind-body gut connection, and that our thoughts and our stress levels and the things that we do with our mind have a big effect on our health. That's one thing that I think there's a big disconnect in the knowledge, that people really are shocked. And even I was in some ways, you know, when somebody told me that, hey, you have to bring down your stress levels to fix your hormones, I was kind of surprised. Like, how does my, worry, my stress, affect the rest of my body, or inflammation? So the brain gut health connection is a huge one. Trying to really have some more body awareness, know yourself a little bit better. And then I also talk a lot about food. That's one of the biggest areas that we said, like, it's a big needle mover. Lots of things you can do with your food to improve your health.
So I have a lot of people asking me about bone broth, and that seems to be, again, one of those low-hanging fruit that everybody can make. It's easy to do. It's inexpensive. It's hard to do it wrong. And it seems to really help so many different areas. How would you help someone kind of just get started in looking at their food? I love that you incorporate the mind-body piece. I know, you're one of these doctors that I love, that you walk the walk as you talk the talk. You practice mind-body medicine yourself. You espouse it with all of your patients. You try to teach everybody a little bit about how to take care of themselves. How would you make a recommendation for incorporating that on a daily basis? Going to yoga every day, going to a meditation class? What are some easy ways people can get started doing mind-body medicine?
The thing that people get wrong is it doesn't have to be a 90-minute yoga class. If it is, great, good for you, but it can be just like 10 to 15 minutes. It can be a nature walk, a walk with your dog, with your children, with your loved ones. It can be playing outside in the sun. It doesn't have to be an organized workout activity. It's just quieting the mind, getting out of your to-do list for even just a few minutes a day can make a huge difference. One of the big tools I teach sometimes for people is, if they're trying to really reset their circadian rhythms, which actually helps with inflammation as well, and also bring down their stress levels and gain mind-body connection, you do it first thing in the morning. You go outside before the hours of 10 o'clock and you get some sunlight. This is hard in some parts of the world, in some parts of the US. There are sun lamps to do this, but nature is ideal. Our brains are wired to see and hear nature sounds and see sunlight. And if you can get that 2 to 3 minutes in the morning, first thing, that I think is an ideal scenario. You'll notice an improvement in your energy levels, in your inflammation levels, in your sleep quality, and your gut health.
Well, the circadian pattern and this routine that we need to get in, and with sleep seems to be so elusive for so many people. How do you help someone get into this pattern, to develop a routine, to get in that circadian rhythm? Are there certain patterns of insomnia that you look for that may tie you to more of an inflammatory cause, or more of a gut cause, or more of a hormone cause?
So we know that there's like a circadian clock actually in every cell of our body. And so when you're off on those circadian rhythms, it's not just affecting, like your sleep-wake cycle, it's affecting so many genes in your body, including inflammation genes. And so what I say is almost everybody, 90%, maybe 95% actually, of the world population has a very similar circadian rhythm. And if you can go to bed between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m. at night and wake up around sunrise or a little bit after sunrise, you have ideally synced your body to the circadian rhythms. So not only is it going to help your sleep, wakefulness, your attention, your brain health, but it's also going to help these inflammatory factors, which can lead to diabetes and heart disease and cancer.
So this circadian rhythm, really, every cell has it. They talk about the clock genes. So it runs every cell, every moment, all the way to a menstrual cycle of a woman over a 28-day lunar type cycle. It's interesting how they're all tied together. Do you see these patterns with all of your advanced training, that the more you learn, the more patterns that you see?
Well, it's funny that in medicine, Western medicine, we're just learning, for example, in my immunology fellowship, we were just learning the patterns of hormonal changes in a woman and the immune system changes, even though we know that the immune system changes so much changes during menstrual cycles and women's hormone changes. But we're just at the beginning in medicine, learning about how women's hormones changes the immune system. I feel like it's stuff that maybe in ancient medicine they've taken for granted and talked about for thousands of years that we're just uncovering now. It's crazy.
So how is that relationship of the immune system to women's hormones? Does the immune system protection change over a woman's menstrual cycle?
Yeah, actually, so when, they talk about this in terms of, we looked at a few diseases when I was in my training. We looked at a condition, actually very specific condition called chronic urticaria, which is a hormonally, or at least idiopathic, I guess you would call it, because there's no known cause, where women get hives every day or every few days with no known cause. And we found that the allergy cells, immune cells that produce an allergic response, were much more active during the week before someone's menstrual cycle, kind of like the low hormonal state. So yeah, it's, and now we're finding out so many more things. I mean, we already know that pregnancy, in 1/3 of patients makes their asthma much worse, and 1/3 makes it much better, and in 1/3 it stays the same. So it's kind of variable in terms of what the immune response does, but we do know that illnesses happen more often the week prior to the menstrual cycle, indicating to us that your viral defense mechanisms are likely blunted during that time. And it doesn't, like I said, there's not as much knowledge just yet, but we do know that the immune system fluctuates, depending on the hormones, just like inflammation fluctuates depending on hormones. If you have a chronic hormonal imbalance, it's going to affect your immune system, it's going to affect your gut, it's going to affect your brain, it's going to affect inflammation, and all of those things at once.
That's fascinating. One of my European physician friends has told me how he had patients with multiple sclerosis that went into remission during pregnancy, then came back with a vengeance after birth. So there's something magical about that.
In pregnancy, you tend to really suppress your autoimmune diseases, because naturally during pregnancy your body's autoimmunity goes down because there's a fetus which is foreign, and you don't want to start attacking that foreign fetus. And so your body's autoimmune, everybody who has autoimmune disease often gets a feeling of remission during pregnancy, and then it comes back after.
So they were using progesterone actually to try to treat MS in Europe for a period of time for multiple sclerosis. And is progesterone seem to be the magic hormone, or is it the interplay of all of them together? What's your thought?
It's honestly, it's the balance between estrogen and progesterone. So we think that, in a typical American woman, often they're estrogen dominant. And so progesterone can help balance that imbalance, but that's not always the case, but often the case in people.
You know, I appreciate you mentioning estrogen dominance, because I was going to ask you about it, and to kind of help our viewers understand about estrogen dominance, what causes it, and how do they find out if they have it, and how do they address it?
Estrogen dominance often shows up as, with people who will have hormonal symptoms, very bad PMS. They will also have weight gain, especially in the hips and thigh area. They will have heightened PMS headaches. And there's many, it's hard because there's so many overlap. There's so many things that overlap with estrogen dominance, but a lot of people will say they get very bad periods or severe PMS and then painful periods. And they'll also have very severe symptoms at that time of month, because you're supposed to have an estrogen progesterone ratio. And because we're around all these plastics, because we're drinking all this contaminated water, because we are getting estrogen from maybe some of the foods we eat, we actually have a very estrogen dominant environment right now, with the BPAs and all these kind of phthalates and all these chemicals in our environment that are actually pushing us towards a hormonal imbalance. And so you end up seeing a lot of people that have symptoms that sound all the same, but nothing comes up, say, for example, on typical GYN testing.
Well, that's the beauty of the background you bring to this, Amy, is you have the immunology understanding, the hormone understanding, the nutrition, you're passionate about mind-body medicine. I think there's very few practitioners out there that can tie all this together like that.
I think that's the future of medicine, though. I think we all understand that we can no longer move forward with the traditional model of primary care and healthcare and women's care. Women, in it more so than even men, are suffering with so many conditions that are unexplainable by Western medicine. So it's kind of like we have to be moving in that direction. We don't have a choice, because otherwise we're going to leave so much on the table when it comes to gut health, when it comes to nutrition, hormone health, mind-body health. I mean, these are the areas that we have to push forward on with research, with doctors learning more about it. I even talked to a lot of doctors, and I think you were there when we were talking about doing masterminds and helping other physicians incorporate this into their practice so that we can actually have a change in the healthcare system as we know it.
Well, one of the most common illnesses in women is autoimmune disease. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Is it 1 in 11, or what's the current number?
Yeah, I think it's 1 in 10, 1 in 11. Wow. So, the hygiene hypothesis basically showed that from the turn of the 19th century till now, it has been in epidemic proportions, basically, increased, doubling every 10 years. And it's insane because we're trying to figure out what exactly it is. There's something, we think with the hygiene hypothesis is that there is something about the modern world, and presumably the fact that it's cleaner, we're getting rid of the germs and the bacteria, but getting rid of that bacteria is also causing our immune system to attack itself. So because as children we're not getting enough illnesses, our immune system is not getting enough training, and then in turn starts to attack itself. So autoimmunity, allergy, asthma has skyrocketed, and we think the hygiene hypothesis is the reason.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because our treatments for autoimmune disease have gotten more and more aggressive, more and more expensive, and more dangerous. And there are times when we're physicians, we do use those medicines, but it's so nice to be able to look at these other options. You mentioned an entity called chronic urticaria, which is this hives issue. And I've had several patients with it. It's one of the hardest things for me to address. It's a
Yes.
very complicated problem, and it's miserable. And I'm sure several of our viewers have it and have been to every doctor, and no one seems to help it. I'm fascinated that you find ways to stop this process and help women to address it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating when you tell someone, and in any case in medicine, I know you probably deal with this all the time. When you tell someone that there's no cure, that this is autoimmune or their own body creating this problem, it's very frustrating to hear as a patient, like, well, what am I supposed to do then? Or how do I fix it? Like, there's no final answer that you can say, hey, take this medicine for 7 days and it'll be done. So that a lot of this autoimmunity that we're dealing with is very, very frustrating to patients and to doctors alike, because we don't have a lot of tools in our arsenal right now to deal with it, at least in an adequate way.
Well, I know for something like chronic urticaria, I think of also things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. These are kind of the end results, but 10 women can come see us. They have 10 separate paths of how they got to that problem, like chronic urticaria or to fibromyalgia. So really, we have these disease and illness entities, but there's multiple paths that people can come down to get there. Is that right?
Yeah, it's especially with fibromyalgia, because we really don't even understand exactly the pathophysiology, and it's fascinating how many people are suffering from the same kind of constellation of symptoms, but coming at it from very, very different paths. I'm sure you, because you have such a specialized clinic, where you see people that maybe have not gotten answers from traditional medicine, you probably see a good amount of that. Is that right?
I do. And I think the tools that you and I both bring to our clients really, we look at the thyroid differently. We look at the hormone balance differently. We understand toxicity. We understand the gut health. And I'm kind of still surprised how many people come see me that have never had any of that addressed the right way. There's still a lot to learn out there. And you're one of the world's great teachers. You're teaching so many people on a day-to-day basis. You're teaching doctors as well as patients. And I think,
as are you.
Well, it's such a key for us. And we have to kind of raise the bar for everybody because women need it. They deserve it. I tell a lot of women that you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't forget to do something right. This is a natural evolution of something that happened to you that for you manifested this way, whereas for your neighbor, it might manifest a different way. And so it's really that root cause, trying to get back to what's really at the core issue for that. How do you help people really get to that core root cause and understand all these different complexities when you're talking about so many different things? How do you help people walk away from your visits without it just being overwhelming for them?
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming. So I think, like I said before, I think that talking about food is very palatable to people. I think people at this day and age are ready to make a change with their food, but they're just not sure what to do because there's so much information out there. It's not like there's not enough. It's like there's so much conflicting. Should I be going keto? Should I be going paleo? Should I be, what should I be taking out of my diet? And so what I usually say is, hey, we're going to look into all these things. We're going to be working on these things. But in the meantime, let's try to figure out your food sensitivities. Let's try to figure out, what your body, how your body feels when it's off the sugar and when it's off the processed grains and when it's off, the soda, and kind of detox that out of your system. And it's amazing. I'm sure you see this too, Mark. It's amazing to see how good people can just feel just by making those initial changes to their diet.
Well, it's interesting. You're so right that sometimes people make it too hard. And they, I don't like diets because the first three letters are DIE, and most diets don't work. And I know you developed this personalized nutrition plan for people. What are some of the mistakes you see a lot of people who come see you that they did when they tried to do this on their own, or they use Dr. Google, which I love it when people become educated, but they can get kind of down a rabbit hole and get sidetracked.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem with dietary advice in this day and age is that it's completely conflicting.
Yeah.
Everybody's into clickbait. The clickbait articles are just confusing people. Butter is good, butter is bad. Avocado is good, avocado is bad. And it's like you're at some point, during this Dr. Google search, you end up with everything's good
Yeah.
or everything's bad. What is left? People ask me all the time, like, what's safe to even eat? Like, oh, I thought kale was, oh no, but you can't eat too much kale because it's got oxalates. And then it's like, I thought that you're not, people say, oh, I thought you're not supposed to eat that. So it's really, really hard to tell people like, okay, you don't have to listen to everything out there on the internet. You basically have to go by the big needle movers, the things that everyone can pretty much agree on. And I usually tell people to go Dr. Khan, who is, our friend Joel Khan, who's like 100% vegan, because I find that you can do 90%. I think 90% of vegan diets, healthy paleo diets, healthy, Mediterranean diets all have the same factors. They all have tons and tons of vegetables and healthy fats, and they take out the sugar.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I met Caldwell Esselstyn, who did the documentary Forks Over Knives, which everyone should watch. And I tried vegan, and it didn't really work for me. And I thought it was because I ski and climb, and I'm so active. And then he introduced me to a bodybuilder who was able to maintain a lot of muscle mass on a vegan diet. And that was impressive to me. And I think you're right. Joel Kahn, he might be right for a lot of people. And that's it's not easy to go vegan, but it's an easy answer because it seems to help so many people. And it's a good starting point for people.
I think that if you're 90% there, and then if you want to add in some clean protein sources, animal-based, you're fine. I don't think you need to you need to read every label. I mean, for most people, I find that you don't have to read every label, go to every restaurant and tell them that you have, that kind of thing. I think that with very responsibly sourced, organic, free range fish, for example, it can be very, very healthy as long as the primary sources of your calories are not coming from processed meats, which is my problem with keto.
Yes.
Because I find that people that do keto cannot sustain it or most people cannot sustain it on a clean, organic, they're often eating tons of processed foods and processed meats, which are extremely bad for your health.
So what's wrong with the hamburger from the grocery store or from the bologna or ham or turkey that's at the deli counter? Why are those not the ideal choices?
Yeah. So hormones, there is cancer causing, when you grill something on, you create all these cancer causing oils. Then they actually found that resistant bacteria coming from a cow was traced to hamburger meat and then traced into people's gut bacteria.
Wow.
So you can get these crazy bacteria from these antibiotic laden animals. You know that antibiotics are completely overused. That resistant bacteria was found in their guts, in the guts of patients that were suffering with very severe infections with resistant bacteria. And they traced it back to the conventional meat that they were eating.
Well, I think 70% of the antibiotics used in America go to livestock. That's a shocking number. And
it's insane. And also the growth hormones that they give. And even though they're banned in the US, there's still ones that are undetectable that people are still using. So there's tons of chemicals. And, even if you don't believe in the ethics of it, you should at least do it for the hormones and the chemicals. And when we talked about estrogen dominance, this is often coming from hormone-laden meat and dairy.
How about farm-raised fish? Is there something to be worried about there?
Mercury. There's tons. So basically, I think fish, honestly, Mediterranean diets, if you look at really great long-living people, often they had fish, Japanese, and the Mediterranean diet. There is a lot to be said about, wild fish that is not contaminated with tons of mercury and chemicals. But we just don't live in that environment anymore. And we live in an environment where a lot of the fish have concentrated contaminants in their bodies. And so you just have to know where they're sourced from.
So the Mediterranean diet, I grew up with a big family, and I think part of the Mediterranean diet is the social eating as a group and talking and social connectivity. And is that something you tell your patients, is really get social?
Isn't that crazy that that's such a huge part of longevity? Like if you look at the longest living people in the world, they all have a huge aspect of community and purpose and relationships, something that we completely ignore in traditional Western medicine.
So let me put you on the spot. What do you tell your female patients when they ask you about drinking wine?
I'm a fan.
How about the limit? The government says 1 glass of wine per day for women, 2 for men. I think men that drink 14 glasses of wine a week, that sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah, I say under 5
a week.
Because
that's a good number.
I think when we looked at multiple studies, they looked at, even moderate, there is a very fine line between the anti-inflammatory bits and the negative effects of alcohol, which we all kind of know about. And so I think that having, 5 or less a week is a good idea. That means that you're not using it as a crutch at the end of your day to release your stress feelings. You're not, you're drinking it socially at dinner, or, you might not have any for the weekdays. For example, I don't have any alcohol on the weekdays. I'm just too active. I don't want to feel tired the next day. And I save it for social get-togethers on the weekends, and I never really go past, for me to go past that limit would be way too much anyways.
Well, I used to keep a picture in my office until one of my female patients took it home with her because she was mad at me. It was a glass of wine full of sugar. And so when I got asked how much they can have per week, I would just hold up that picture of a glass of sugar. How do you see a glass of wine and sugar? Do you see it really as a sugar?
Yeah, when I talk to people about reducing their sugar, one of the biggest culprits is their alcohol and wine intake. And so we often have to talk about, hey, it's either the wine or, taking out, having like 50 grams of sugar a day is really difficult if you're having a glass of wine.
So Amy, you're a board certified allergist, immunologist, and internal medicine specialist. What's your descriptive of how do you share your thoughts about Candida, this yeast that if you're on the internet, everybody has it. We've both treated people who really do have it, and it can be a game changer for some. How do you introduce it with your clients, and how do you assess it?
This is a tough one for me because, Candida, real Candida infection, I tell people, listen, real Candida infection, Candida in your blood.
It's scary.
It's deadly. Yeah, you would not survive. Or most people do not survive a Candida infection because it's immunosuppressed people or I'm talking about HIV and cancer patients. Those are the people who get bloodborne Candida. What I hear people talking about is Candida overgrowth in their gut. And that is, to me, bacterial overgrowth, Candida overgrowth. That is a diet and lifestyle problem that often gets better when you take out the sugars, you take out the processed foods, you improve your lifestyle. I don't really consider it its own entity as it stands on the internet. I don't know. What's your take on it?
Well, I love your description. And, I trained in Phoenix, and they were building a new hospital building next to the cancer center, and they stirred up all the dirt and actually gave the cancer patients coccidiomycosis, a fungal infection.
Wow.
Scary
Yeah.
stuff. And so, yeah, you're right. Real fungal infections are different than this overgrowth. And I completely agree with you. If you get the gut balanced, it has a wisdom of its own to reset that. And I think there's too much made of it on one hand and maybe not enough on another hand. That is
Yeah,
part of the system.
I think you're right. I think that when it comes to Candida overgrowth, there's so much misinformation or but then on the other hand, in the Western medical world, they don't even acknowledge it. So I think it's somewhere in the middle that there's this bacterial fungal overeating these symptoms.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily as bad and on the other hand, it does exist.
So Amy, I so appreciate all your time today, your great knowledge. If there were 2 or 3 things you'd like every woman of the thousands listening, what would you like it to be for them to know?
Number 1 is that mind-body connection. It sounds like a very big concept, but it can be as easy as spending 2 minutes by yourself in nature in the morning. And that's all it takes. The second thing is ask for help. I think women in today's world take on so much responsibility. And it's almost like you're programmed to take on more than you can handle. And I think I want to tell women, like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to get someone to help you with maybe your household chores. Maybe you get an assistant at work. Maybe you get a team to help you do what you do, because every successful woman that's also healthy will tell you that it can't happen on your own. Especially if you're trying to do career and you're trying to do family and you're trying to do health, you're trying to keep your sanity and your body at its healthiest state. I think it takes a community, a village, a group of people. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
You know, it's interesting. One of my clients told me the other day that behind every good man is a good woman. Most men can't be successful without a good woman in their life. I call them their better half. And she also said, behind every good woman is her best friend.
Yeah, support is so important. I mean, everybody talks about this healthcare crisis women are facing, and I firmly believe that is because of the responsibilities on their shoulders. It's that same thing, that mind-body connection. When you're stressed out, your adrenaline's going, your cortisol's up, you don't have time to reset and repair and make all those hormones, and that gut becomes leaky. It's like so tightly knit there.
Well, Amy, this has been just so fun talking to you. I always enjoy it. I always learn something from you too. So thank you. How do all of our viewers connect with you? You're welcome. How do they connect with you, find out more about what you're doing, and learn more from you? How do they find you?
You can go to www.amymdwellness.com. And I'm also very active on Instagram at Dr. Amy Shah.
Great. What are you excited about in your work, or what are you working on, and what really gets you going to work every day right now?
So right now I'm working on a practitioner course for a lot of doctors who want to do wellness, get out there on social media, get their voices heard, especially when they're thinking of something outside the box. I'm really trying to empower other physicians to do that. I'm also working a lot one-on-one with clients around the world using Skype and phone to hone in on their nutrition, fasting. I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, and also how to really take charge of their bodies.
So for those listening, they can find you online and connect with you, and they'd all be fortunate to have the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Mark.
And the fact you're teaching the teachers tells me so much about your passion about the future of health, and you're a big part of it. I know you write for Mind Body Green. You're one of the speakers at their annual conference every year, and I greatly appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Dr. Amy Shah.
Thanks so much, Mark, for having me.